welcome to day 2 of Design Thinking Workshop hosted by Innovation Cell Raipur. Disha Kaushal ma'am will take over for the presentation now.
Hello and good morning, all of you. Sorry, actually, I accidentally said good morning because we generally take up classes right in the morning. So sorry. Good evening, everybody. And I'll do a quick recap of what we had covered yesterday. So if you all remember, we started with what design thinking is, beginning with a little definition or how we can get ourselves to understand design thinking, the terms that we is relatively new for most of you. And I'll just switch on to the presentation mode. One second. Yes, so I was saying that design thinking is an iterative, creative problem solving process to understand the user, challenge assumptions, redefine problems, using elements from a designer's toolkits, which are that of empathy and experimentation, in order to come up with new solutions and alternative strategies. Right. So, in today's session, we will cover an important element of empathy and definition. Because if you remember right, I had told you that this is the part that needs the most hand-holding for you people. Ideation, I am 100% sure that all the students today are very smart and they have a very good imagination. They can come up with ideas. The only help that they need is identifying properly what exactly the problem area is and which is the problem area that they should be working on. All right. So I'm going to move to quickly this design thinking framework from here. One second. Yes, I had told you about this 5-step design thinking framework: empathize, design, ideate, prototype, and test. And we moved on to discussing that how you can actually practice empathy, because you need some tools or some actual action points for you to be able to put yourself in the shoes of your user, consumer, client, whoever you might want to call them. You can even call them a stakeholder, because there are multiple people involved whenever there is a complex problem and it affects their lives differently. So which is the stakeholder or the user that you choose to go ahead with to solve the problem will typically determine the rest of the steps in the design thinking framework. Right. I had discussed these examples with you yesterday. And all right. So true innovation requires us to look beyond the problem as it is presented to us and discover the true problem, a process called problem exploration. So I'll tell you why this entire process is both novel and extremely interesting and eye-opening. So I'll come back to this. But before this, let me take you through a case study. Now imagine you have to solve a problem. You have to solve a problem that there are about, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
I am? Oh, okay, fine. So am I able to present, or is it turned off right now?
No, ma'am, the presentation is turned off.
It has turned off. Okay. Just a minute. Yes. So this group of researchers from Stanford, they were presented a challenge, and a very typical challenge, you would say, that the challenge that they had was to come up with a incubator. If you people understand what an incubator is, it is a an apparatus which is typically you will see in a hospital, and it is used in the neonatal unit. Neonatal unit is where premature babies or babies who've just been born have some complications in their birth, and they are kept in that unit so that their body temperature can be maintained, they can be kept warm, and they till the time that their body and their immunity is ready enough to go out into the world and live with other people, they are kept in that unit. Every year 20 million premature and low birth weight babies were born, leading to a very high infant mortality. So this group of researchers were presented with a unique challenge that in developing country like Nepal, you have to design an incubator for them. So, and
Uh, Sorry to interrupt, but the presentation is still isn't visible.
it is not visible.
No, ma'am.
Okay, just a minute. Is it visible now?
No, ma'am.
Oh my god. So the challenge was very unique. They had to come up with an incubator which would keep the people, the baby or the newly born infant warm and prevent its death, keeping the temperature intact for a certain period of time. And because they realized that a lot of problems or a lot of casualties were happening right from the birth to when a child was transferred to a hospital. So this group of researchers, they realized that now we cannot sit here in the US and design for a second or third world country like Nepal, and because their challenges are very different, their demographics are different, people's behavior is very different, and the biggest shock for them was that the births were not happening in a hospital. Most of the births were happening either at home or they were happening in a rural setting with the help of a midwife or a paramedic, not even a proper doctor. This itself was very, very challenging, and they could just initially was stuck with a dead end that what do we do from here? How will we be able to move ahead of this? And at that point of time, they realized that we need to come up with something which is low cost, which is affordable, something that can be carried around by the people of the region, so that in case there is an emergency after the giving birth to the child at home, the child can be transferred to the hospital, and the temperature of the body of the child can be maintained for that entire duration, because the hospital is also not very close, and sometimes it takes 3 to 4 hours just to reach a proper or a well functioning hospital. So your innovation or your design of the equipment has to be low weight. Can be easily carried to different places, and the material itself should be sturdy. And hence these students, they came up with a prototype which is similar to like that of a baby blanket, like how you would wrap a baby in a swaddle or a blanket, जैसे बच्चे को लपेट के पकड़ते हैं एक मदर अपने हाथों में, like that they designed a incubator, and they named it Embrace. Okay. Can you hear me and can you see this video, or is there still some problem? Swati? Priya? Priya?
Sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, actually, I need to know that, if you were able to see or not.
Yes, ma'am, we can see.
Yeah, okay, just a minute. Yes. So this was upon experimenting with a lot of material that would work, they realized that they could use a sleeping bag material. A sleeping bag material is something that you could have seen a little shiny plastic glossed material, and typically you would have seen your sweatshirts or your exercise wear or air dry material, which most of the people use for sports activities, something of that sort. And they thought, what could we do
Excuse me,
with
ma'am. Your
yes.
presentation isn't visible again.
Okay, no problem. I'm just explaining it to you. So this explanation is more important than the visual because these things are not mentioned over there. So what can we do to maintain the temperature of the incubator? And they used a small pouch within that incubator, which was built of a material called phase change material, and that PCM phase change material would maintain the correct temperature for up to 4 hours. So all you had to do was to dip it in hot water, dip this blue thing that you can see on your screen in warm water, and then it would that pouch which is inside this incubator would keep warm for the next 4 hours, and the people could easily transfer the baby to the hospital where further care can be taken. The benefit of this was that removing that pouch from the rest of the incubator, or this swaddle, so to say, was easy, and it did not even make the swaddle wet. So the baby is not wet or getting irritated by in any manner. The person who is carrying the baby is protected, and all you have to do is hold the baby close to yourself. So whatever be your mode of conveyance, be it a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler or a four-wheeler, you can take the baby conveniently to the nearest possible hospital. And do you know the kind of difference that it brought? Normally, an incubator, a top class incubator, they because they assumed the cost that would go in US. So it would cost $20,000. And when they built this material, this incubator was costing only $25. So can you see the amount of difference? You have brought down the cost 1,000 times, and it is easy to use. It can be taken anywhere, and lives of so many babies is being protected by this. So this is by far the most important and most brilliant example of problem redefinition, and how you can identify the problem at the right place to in order to be able to solve it. That is why I have taken up this example. I will give you a link also. I'm going to type it out in the chat box. Please have a look at it and Google this, embrace infant incubator. This is the most brilliant case study. So this is one example. The next example that I wanted to share with you all is that of Airbnb. I am sure most of you are familiar with the service, and even if you haven't booked their services even once, you might have heard the name of Airbnb from somewhere, or seen the ads on television or social media. So why do you think that Airbnb is such a revolutionary in the industry that it comes from? First of all, Airbnb stands for Bed and Breakfast. So it was typically a place where you could spend your nights and prepare breakfast in the morning. How your typically lodges or your bed and breakfast settings work in foreign countries, and it is not very elaborate, but it is a decent place for you to stay and move on. So this concept of bed and breakfast settings came from Europe initially, where people usually travel a lot and travel on foot and hitchhike a lot. They use different modes of conveyance, and the places that they eventually stay at or spend the night at are very basic. Sometimes it's a dormitory and there are multiple beds laid around. So their concept of travel itself is very different from how we Indians travel. Our travel is more family oriented and more group oriented, but their travel is not like that. It is more of a solo expedition, and you truly want to go out there and explore and do all sorts of things. But this is more on an individualistic level. So Airbnb, then the founders, they launched it in the initial stages. Their business seemed to be doing very well, and they had about 40 to 50 listings in a few major cities in the United States. But for 6 months, they had a standard sale of $200 per week, nothing more, and they were just stagnant at that. So 40 to 50 listings means have listed 40 to 50 places to stay uh, on your website, which is not too high because you are in a few cities, and in places like especially New York, Seattle, Chicago, where people travel a lot, you need at least some kind of visibility. So you need more listings and you need people to be booking it more often. At this point, they were a part of a Y Combinator. So a Y Combinator would be a typical, what should I call it? A venture capitalist setting, but in a group. So it is a group of startups who have come together in a huddle under one roof, and they are being funded by, an agency or a person to carry their business forward. And Paul Graham gave them a very interesting piece of advice. He told them to get out, not literally get out of the space, but go out there and explore and try to use the service themselves, and then see why or what is wrong with the service. Because often, we have a very narrow view of the services or the product that we are offering, and we're not using this from the user's point of view. So these guys, the founders they decided to go and experience the Airbnb experience in New York. They opened the Airbnb website to book themselves a nice room, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. They kept browsing to the listings and looking at a decent place to stay, and they did not feel like booking. When they went back to their place of business, they told Paul Graham that, we looked at the websites, and, the experience also seemed seamless. The prices were mentioned and the facilities were mentioned, but the pictures in the website were so dull and morose. मतलब कि उन photographs को देख के हमारा उस जगह को बुक करने का मन ही नहीं कर रहा था. And they realized that probably that is the reason that the current host, they have probably a phone camera or archaic camera with which they have taken pictures, bad pictures or low resolution pictures of the house, which did not invite too many users. And when you are viewing it on a screen which has a high resolution, and you are constantly bombarded with so many flashy visuals on the screen, and when you come across a dull picture, obviously you would not want to book it. So they knew that how they wanted to solve the problem, and they said that it's all we need to do is get a professional photographer with a DSLR, go to these 40, 50 listings that we have in New York City, and in each of these settings, we will click pictures, high-res pictures, beautiful pictures of these homes, and put them on the website. So instead of worrying about scale, they went to New York, rented a camera, took beautiful photos of all the listings, came back, uploaded them online, and they waited. In 1 week, within the first week, their sales jumps to $400, which is the double of what they were having since the last 6 months. I'll show you some of the images. These are the typical photographs that a user or a house owner or a property owner would have taken of their property. And they seem very regular and not something that feels aspirational for a traveler. So instead of that, they took the best lit angles in that property and modified them, maybe upgraded a little furniture here and there, made advices to the property owners. And this little difference of, clicking of pictures through a professional camera brought such a big difference. This gave birth to the now extremely prevalent concept of professionally taken photographs of any surface, especially in travel and food, in order to sell the service better. Now, at this point, all I want to ask you is that do you think this solution is scalable? Because at that point, they had very few, hotel listings or, house listings with them. But sooner or later, when their solutions to when the business grows, when they move to different cities, different countries, different continents, and their listings grow by hundreds and thousands and lakhs and millions, how do you think they will be able to keep up? And since Priya, I have you only on this call, I'm going to pose this question to you. Priya, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So, what do you think that they can do if we think about in scale? बिकॉज आप ऐसा जब तक आपके पास लिमिटेड नंबर ऑफ लिस्टिंग्स हैं या प्रॉपर्टीज हैं तब आप कर सकते हो. क्या करोगे आप अगर बहुत ज्यादा प्रॉपर्टीज होंगी या बहुत ज्यादा होंगे? विल यू बी एबल टू go everywhere? What do you think they would have done, or what do you think they are doing right now?
I think they have people everywhere to micromanage each and everything. So, kind of a administration system.
Yes, actually, you are right and wrong both, because they don't bank on a team of, they don't have an existing team. But yeah, in most cities, they're able to contact someone. And if the owner wishes so, and if they themselves feel that the own pictures that the owners has posted are not high res or very inviting, so they will book a professional photographer for you and get this thing done so that your listing looks appealing on the Airbnb website and the app. And it is not as difficult as it seems, because in today's day and age, most people have very high res cameras on their phone itself. And even if that does not work, or you don't have an idea of lighting and how to arrange things properly, they will hire someone. Of course, the cost is managed over the time between the service provider and the property owner. But this service, this practice is still there, that if the owner wants, they can still hire someone for you and get this done. So at that point of time, they did not worry about scale and just went with the instinct that since I am not booking because I don't like the photos, even other people will not want to book it. Even today, for every new joinee, Airbnb asks them to go and live in an Airbnb property for a week and then host another property for another week, because this gives them, every joinee, a truly Airbnb experience as a host and as a service provider, which is a brilliant practice because you get to know the hospitality day in and day out, and you will be experiencing it firsthand. Basically, imbibing the culture of immersing in the service that they would work for, and then come back with suggestions that would improve the service better. So one of the suggestions that came from one of their own employees was, when people were highlighting or bookmarking properties, shortlisting properties which they would want to stay at, so usually you would tick mark it or put a star over there and go to your wish list later. One of the employees only said that maybe we should have a heart over there. And now also, if you go on the Airbnb app, you still can bookmark or shortlist properties by putting a heart. So that whole sense of ownership that you provide to your employees or within the service domain becomes very, very important and very, very empowering. So this also is a very good example of problem definition and how you can define a problem, go to ideation, and go to the solutioning phase without even worrying about the scalability of the solution. Am I understood, Priya? Is this
Yes,
making sense? So we've discussed two examples so far, and if there are any questions on YouTube, I would really like to take them up right now. Yeah, any questions?
no, ma'am. No questions here.
Okay, okay, fine. So I'll go on to my third example, and then after that we will come to a very important thing, which is I like to call problem statement or a problem redefinition, where you select a small section of the larger problem and choose to work on only that. Okay. Yes. So this example is very important because this mirrors people's behavior in the physical world. So I'll tell you what happened was the conflict that was there, that without any major breakthrough in the past few decades, the banks in the early 2000s faced a critical problem: how to get consumer segments, specifically, women who have been born in the 80s, 90s, or even later than that, to open new checking and savings account, because they were not getting any new accounts opened within the bank. So Bank of America, they hired a design research firm that observed a dozen families and interviewed people on the street. One of the critical and most important piece of insight that they formed was that people round up their checkbook entries and financial transactions as it was more convenient. And so was born their product, which is called Keep the Change. And every time when one buys something with a Bank of America Visa debit card, the bank rounds up the purchase to the nearest dollar and transfers the difference from your checking account to your savings account, and you get interest on that. Uh, is it easy to understand or some difference difficulty? Priya, can you tell me?
Yes, ma'am. I can understand.
Okay, you got what the challenge was. Priya, you
Yes.
understood? Yes. So there are two main objectives of sharing these case studies. Firstly, it is design thinking for new service development, how you can create a new service, and also design thinking for a service industry like banking, which is usually not considered to be the most exciting, or it is one of the most dull and morose industries, if you talk from a designer's point of view. But it, because it is dull and because it is unattractive, it has all the more scope for making it more lucrative and mirroring people's physical behaviors in the real world to make them do things that you want to do. So often they noticed, the design research agency that was hired by Bank of America, that mothers were in charge of the finances. And this was in early 2000, before online banking and mobile banking had more or less replaced the idea of a balanced checkbook. Some moms and had the practice of rounding up the number in their checkbooks. This made addition easier and also gave a small buffer in spending. So what happened was they signed checkbook if they realized that they needed $90 to spend. So they would sign a check for $100, take out the $100 and keep that buffer $10 with themselves as a saving that they could use at a later point of time. It is as simple as that. So you, मतलब इसको बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स वे में समझने की जरूरत नहीं है. जैसे हम अपने घर में भी कुछ सामान लेते हैं तो जो चेंज बचता है कभी लोग गुल्लक में डाल देते हैं या अपने घर के बच्चों को दे देते हैं कि you can keep it safely somewhere. Is it understood, Priya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So armed with this insight and the knowledge that many of these families had saving difficulty, what money they had, IDEO, the design research agency, came up with this idea or a promotional campaign which was called Keep the Change, like I mentioned. So people could enroll in a savings account that would round off their purchases made with debit cards, and the average would be transferred to a savings account automatically. Additionally, the bank would match the money transferred to savings to a certain dollar amount. So, for example, if you were saving, say, 59 cents or 70 cents, the bank would add the remaining 30 cents from their own side, and then, as an incentive for you to save more. And as you might imagine, this program became very, very popular, and not only with the people who had trouble saving money. Ever since the program launched in September of 2005, more than 12.3 million customers enrolled, saving a total of more than $2 billion. So you can imagine the kind of difference a small, this tiniest fraction of a dollar saving that can make. And of all the new customers, 60% chose to enroll in this Keep the Change program. Fact is that Bank of America no longer matches the contributions through the Keep the Change program. So if you are saving, say, your 70 cents or 75 cents, the bank is no longer adding the extra 30 cents or 25 cents. But that image that the bank has built of helping you save, is that trust that they have gained with the customers is bringing more customers to open accounts with Bank of America. Is it understood?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there are some key things that I want you to take away from this particular case study, is how interestingly they have noticed the behavior or the spending behavior or the monetary habits of people, understanding who is in charge of the finances. And very obvious, even in your household you would understand that, even if the father is the main or the majority of income, he gets the majority of the income in the family, still major household decisions or household expenditure decisions, so to say, are taken by the mother or the lady of the house, as is very common in India also, or in most parts of the world. So understanding that kind of behavior and mirroring it in a digital transaction is a brilliant insight. And there is another example of something like this, which happened in a bank in rural Africa. So what they realized was this was a small tribe in rural Africa, and this tribe was not in the habit of opening accounts or keeping money in the accounts in a bank, because for whatever reason they were tribals, and the formality of a institutionalized building and putting your money there, they had problems of faith. And also they felt that the banking instruments or the services that the banks were offering them at that point of time did not understand how they wanted to save. So they brought in this bank in Africa, they brought in another research agency to understand that why people are not keeping the money within the banks, and why they are not saving when the bank is offering such high interest rates, such, so many facilities to them. So what this agency did was, they did on ground research, immersed themselves, lived with the people within that rural setting, and what they saw in these households was, it was not that people were not saving, but they were saving for specific projects. Like, I often quote this. If you've seen that movie, Mujhse Shaadi Karogi, in that movie, Salman Khan keeps those piggy banks, separate piggy banks for Behin ki Shaadi or whatever. You remember Priya? If you've seen that movie, he puts these different jars in which he stores money for different projects. So,
Yes, ma'am.
so in the same way, these people were putting money or saving money and putting it in different jars. Like, say, for example, one jar is for the daughter's wedding, the other jar is for medical emergency, the third jar is for, say, buying a property or whatever. So they were saving, but they were saving for a specific project. And the moment the bank or the research agency understood that, your financial services or the instruments that you offer to the public should be like that only, so they next round of promotions or marketing went about like this only, that open a bank account with us in order to um, save for your daughter's wedding, or open a bank account for us in case of a for in case of a medical emergency, or for you know buying a property. And these were the kind of names that they were offering to these accounts or these lending instruments. And the people therefore got more faith in the banking institution, that since they understand us and they understand why we want to save and in what manner we want to save, we have more faith in them, and now we want to uh, bank with them or save with them. Understood, Priya?
Yes, ma'am.
So these are two important examples that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to write this down in the chat window also. Look up Bank of America's Keep the Change and other design-led banking campaigns. All right. So we have discussed three examples today. One was that of the Embrace Infant Incubator, which again is an excellent example of how problem redefinition and proper understanding of the setting, the context of the problem where it is happening, drastically change the way in which you will ideate, the way in which you will prototype, and the conditions under which you have to test your product. With this in mind, I will introduce to you the next part, or why I had built this entire segment was to help you to understand how to frame a problem statement or how to define your problem properly. Give me a minute, just a minute. I'll move to that slide and then you can understand that better. Yes. Priya, can you see now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So typically, when you get to the stage of problem definition or problem redefinition, what you should do, or what the kind of template that you should use, is that user in this case is going to be fields, or you can wait, let me edit it so that it becomes simpler for you to understand. One second. All right. All right. User, in the first blank, you will put whoever your user is. Say, for example, if you're talking about a paramedic who is overworked or exhausted because of the COVID-19 emergency, needs a way to, you know, properly and efficiently conduct their duties, at the same time maintain a good work-life balance, because he is having, or he or she is having, a burnout due to excess working hours, which in turn can cause medical casualties. So this is an example of a problem statement which talks about a specific problem. Are you understanding, Priya? You know how to frame a problem statement.
Yes, ma'am.
So it talks about a specific user from the larger context of all the stakeholders. You select one stakeholder that you want to solve the problem for. Needs a way to, over here in the second blank, you must always put an actionable verb. Say for example, reduce the stress, or to lighten the burden, or to work more efficiently in fewer hours. So when you are writing statements like this, you are in a way creating an action plan which is more action oriented. That is why I'm saying in the second blank, you must always fill it up with a verb. In the third blank, sorry, after because, you have to put in a surprise insight, which is something that you have understood only because of your empathy interview or your research, whatever you have done with using whatever empathy technique. Either it is immersion, or it is a conversation, interview, observation, or analogous experience, whatever research or empathy technique you have used, and something surprise or something new, completely novel that you have found out, that should come over here. Now, the reason I'm saying why you should put a surprise insight over here is because if you put in something that you knew even before you conducted the research, there is much less likelihood that you will come up with a novel solution. All right? Priya, are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, brilliant. So, in the first blank, you have to fill in a verb describing a little bit about your user, their lifestyle, or whatever problem that you're trying to stress upon. Needs a way to के बाद जो आपका verb आएगा, this will probably lay down further directions of how your solution could be. It will list down the properties or the desirable traits of the solution that you want. And in the third part, you are talking about the exact problem that they are facing. Now, this template is used all across the world and is very, very effective also. But there are two things that you must always keep in mind. One is that, do not form a problem statement which is very, very narrow, because then it will only allow you to build a certain type of solution. All right. Because, say, for example, I create a problem statement. I'll give you an example of this. A doctor working on COVID-19 duty needs a way to examine non-COVID patients in the hospital face to face, because he, due to the physical limitations, he cannot see, treat them or consult with them in close proximity. So this as a problem statement is too narrow. It is defining the behavior in such a manner that all the solution that you can think of is probably increasing the distance between the doctor and the patient. Such a narrow description will not allow you to come up with solutions like, say, for example, teleconsultation or remote monitoring. That is why when you come up with a problem statement, it should allow you to explore the problem from multiple angles. There can be technical solutions, there can be physical solutions, there can be behavioral solutions, as is in the case of Kaiser Permanente. So, unka kya tha? I'll give you this example because it is very important and very, very relevant also. So they were having some problem with their nursing shifts. That at the end of one nurse's shift, she would go to the patient's bed, take down their vitals and write down what their existing condition was, and discuss with them, and basically take down tedious notes of whatever was going on with the patient at that point of time. She would from there come back to the nurses station, which was a room in which all the nurses used to exchange notes. There she would tell the same thing to another nurse whose shift was just starting, and the same nurse, when her shift starts, she will go to the patient, confirm that, okay, fine, do you need anything? Or are you the same as you were, like, say, for 15 minutes ago or half an hour ago? So this was creating a repetition of behavior, causing irritation to the patient also, because they were being disturbed again and again in a very short span, and creating a lot of confusion and scope of miscommunication at the nurse's station. So they tried multiple solutions, typical your you know how you digitize solutions, and you take a digital pad, you make entries over there and then write down many things. But that also they felt was not helping them, and they felt the need to simplify it even further. So what they did instead was that they hired another group of researchers and behavioral researchers, I would say, because the solution that they came up with was so simple. They removed the nursing station altogether, and they created a small overlap between the nurse's timing. So say for example, one nurse's shift finishes at 9 p.m. and the other one starts at 9 p.m. So what they would do is that they would call both the nurses at 8:45. They visit the patient together from 8:45 to 9. So the nurses whose shift starting is 9 is even ahead of our schedule, and she already has all the details that she needs of the patient. The patient doesn't have to repeat it, so of course it's a big relief for them also. And the nurse who is leaving can be secure and satisfied that all the information that she had to transfer or pass on has been effectively transferred. So sometimes simplifying and not creating a strong technical solution also can be a very good idea. And that is why I'm saying that when you are creating a problem statement, it should allow you to create multiple options: technical, non-technical, zero budget, and very high budget also. So you should not limit your imagination or limit your thinking to buy these things. This a very good example of an excellent problem statement is this one. So this is this company where they realized a very specific problem, that a working professional or student who are living on their own away from home, and they crave for home cooked South Indian breakfast. So can you see in the first 3 lines, they have defined excellently what the user base is and what exactly is their typical setting, and the problem area also they have set up a premise for. Need a way to, इसके बाद आपका verb आता है, overcome the stress and mess while making authentic well shaped medu vadas, because the surprise insight is over here. We eat with our eyes first, and a vada without its traditional shape, which is that of a hole in the center, doesn't give the same satisfaction as a real medu vada. And it is true that because if any of you have tried making a vada at home, getting that hole in the center is very difficult. And even if you get it by accident in 1 or 2, the other vadas end up looking like just blobs of dal, grounded dal. So it is very difficult, and it's a brilliant example. So I'll show you a video also of how the company brilliantly used this to come up with a solution.
Hungry? With ID Vada Batter. Crispy hot vadas are just seconds away. First, wash your new pack thoroughly. Strip away the hygiene protector cover to unveil the magic nozzle. Unlock and unscrew the nozzle. This moving part is the batter cutter. Check to see if the oil is hot. Hold the bag above but close to the oil. Take care, that's hot oil. Lift the cutter upwards like this. Gently squeeze the back to force batter out of the nozzle. Watch the batter take the shape of a vada. Slide the vada cutter to drop the vada-shaped batter into the oil. Take care. Don't let the batter splash in the hot oil. Fry both sides to golden brown. Drain extra oil out and serve. If batter accumulates at the nozzle, wipe with a clean tissue or cloth before making the next one. If air enters the bag, simply prick with a clean, sharp object. And you're done. You can even have your crispy hot vadas tested by a vada expert. success. But of course, with new ID Vada Batter in the pack that shapes batter into Vadas, everybody can Vada.
So, as I was saying, why this is an excellent example of, you know, how a point of view statement or a problem statement. This statement, by the way, is, one second, let me go back to that. I think the presentation has gone off. So I'm going to use the presentation window again. Yes. This is a point of view statement or a problem statement. This can be written in multiple formats. In my personal experience, this format has worked best for me. There are other formats of doing it. You can also frame it in the form of a how might we statement. In the US particularly, new researchers are using how might we statement. So I'll tell you how that template also works. So how might we solve, enhance, improve? Then in the first blank, you put down your pain or pleasure point, which is your surprise insight for the user. Here you define the user so that in the third blank, you put in the desired impact. Okay. So in the third blank over here, you will get ideas for desirable traits in your solution, how you want it to be. So this is all that I wanted to cover with you guys today. We have covered the empathy part and the definition part of your design thinking framework. And with these examples, I think you might be able to, cover these two steps. I would have personally liked to, take you through a journey of this, framework in the format of a workshop where we could have actually worked on a live problem and you could have come up with your own problem statement, ideated on it, prototyped and tested it. But due to this limitation, we are doing it in a digital format. But nonetheless, I'm going to share my email ID on the chat window. And if you ever have any problem in, at any step of the design thinking framework, especially in the problem definition, please feel free to reach out to me. Priya, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think I'm done for the day. So
Okay,
you can.
Ma'am, will you take questions?
Oh, sure.
Yes, ma'am. One of the questions is, ma'am, according to you, what are the fields where new entrepreneurs improvise to make business?
New entrepreneurs improvise. I think most entrepreneurial ventures which are very successful have come from places that people have had personal experiences or personal bitter experiences or something that they have felt very strongly about. I can tell you the example of this. You should look it up also. There's this comic book called Menstrupedia, and it was started by a very dear friend of mine. Her name is Aditi Gupta, and she created that comic to educate young girls and boys about children's puberty and the changes that your body goes through. And when I read the book, and I was around, say, 23 or 24 at that point of time, it still had many things which were quite a revelation for me. And even after having my first, like my daughter, I realized that, I was so unaware of my own body. So things like these on your own experiences with difficult questions make you create unique things. I think, So coming back to the question, best areas for entrepreneurs or new entrepreneurs to go for are the things that you truly disturb you. Yeah, go for that. If you feel that the COVID-19 has truly impacted the education sector and you do not like how this is happening right now for younger kids and toddlers or whatever your own age group, then work on that. If you feel something else is more pertinent right now, maybe vaccine dosages or anything that you feel passionate about, that is the area you should work on, because that is where your motivation level will be the highest.
Okay, ma'am, thank you. Another question says, what are the parameters we must check before releasing the product into the market?
Yes. So it's good that they've brought this question right now. In fact, in today's session, when we have, um, just discussed the problem definition stage and come up with the problem statement, because the factors that you write down over here, you know, in this statement, either you use a point of view statement or you use a how might be statement. In the how might be statement, the last state blank that says is the desired impact is the kind of qualities or the attributes that you want from your product. So once you make something, or you create a prototype, you should try to tally it with this POV statements, whether it is still in sync with the problem that you had set, or the part of the problem that you had set off to solve. And secondly, then you take it back to the same user group with which you had, conducted your initial research, and ask for their opinion by using it. So whenever you create a prototype, it should be a somewhat working and low cost prototype, so that you can easily modify or change it and you don't attach too much value to it. And when you get these new ideas for improvement, or you might have to scrap it completely and come up with a new prototype, but it's always better, because then you don't, money saved here is can be used for investment in another prototype or another product later. So it's good to go back to the user, get it tested in the initial stages, before how you do in technology field or typical beta testing. So that is how you should test it out.
Okay, ma'am. That was all for the questions.
Okay. Great, lovely talking to you all, and I'm glad that people put up questions, because through this live YouTube stream, I don't even get to know how many people are watching, and the interaction is, so to say, filtered. So good that people asked. So it means that some people were listening, and I hope to have more questions tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be talking about ideating, and it's going to be another fun session. I will try to include more videos so that it becomes, you know, less monotonous, and more interesting for you guys. See you tomorrow again at 5 p.m.
Thank you, ma'am. We look forward for your session tomorrow.
Thank you.